Hello, kind-hearted people of Earth and beyond. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast, the podcast that aims to inspire people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness. My name is Brandon Blanks. I'm a writer and a stand-up comedian. I'm also the producer and co-host of this show. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode of the Kindness Rising podcast.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome again to the Kindness Rising podcast. This is Keith Page. I'm here with Brandon Blanks.
How you guys doing?
And we are, again, thrilled to have you listening as we embark on another adventure of Kindness Rising and seeing what we can unpack together along the way. So, Brandon, how are you?
Doing well. I went to a funeral on Saturday, a celebration of life, as they call it. It was pretty nice. My half-brother's dad passed away about 6 weeks ago, so we got the funeral together. It was a nice burial at sea. It's really nice. Or, ashes at sea, not the burial.
Right.
Was that how you call it? Burial? Is that what the body's at sea, burial at sea? Or?
Well, you know what? Our guest today, just so happens, is probably going to be able to help us. Our guest today is Olivia Bareham? How do you say it? Olivia
Bareham.
Okay. And I should be able to pronounce her last name because I actually know her and been trained by her and have spent a bunch of quality time just listening to her and watching her do what she does, which is help people unpack what it is to live well and die well, die consciously. We're gonna jump into all these terms, but let me just first say, Olivia, it is great to have you on as our guest.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Keith. Thank you for inviting me. Talking about my favorite subject.
Good. Well, it's your influence and impact has been huge in my life, and I'm thrilled to have you as a guest. And I hope people listen and then come back and listen again. And then at the end of the day, I hope they really check out your training, and many of them decide to take a courageous next step and get trained and learned about this beautiful thing that you're doing. So, yay you. First, what you do, or I guess I would ask you, what do you refer to yourself as when it comes to this topic around death, midwifery, death doula, end-of-life guide, all those different words?
Well, I started on this path like almost 20 years ago now, and I came in the back door really as a home funeral guide. And my teacher and mentor, she was known as a death midwife, and she helped families create home funerals and care for their own loved ones at home for a 3-day vigil before burial or cremation. So I adopted that term many, many years ago. And that was before the death doula term became quite popular, which is really quite recent.
Right.
It's about the last 5 or 6 years, really, that's become popular. And I was torn between switching over to death doula, but then it occurred to me that most of the trainings and the people who were learning how to be a death doula were those who were helping the death journeyer prepare for their conscious dying. So they were the ones I should say me, I do this too. What we do in the death doula world is to help somebody approach their dying consciously. That is to put their things in order, to look at if there's anything they're afraid of, if there's any unresolved relationships, what's concerning them, how to go on hospice, how to create a legacy. Those sorts of things are what I frame as the death doula's work. He or she is holding the hand of somebody and escorting them up to the doorway. And the reason I stay using the term death midwife is that because of my work as a home funeral guide, I take them all the way to the burial or cremation. which is anything between 2-3 days, a week, or 10 days later. So it's not just approaching the last breath, it's from the last breath to the burial or cremation. And that's not just with the person who died. Obviously, I'm tending to the soul of that person as they lay in honor, but it's also helping the family come to terms with what happened, exhale fully, begin to prepare this funeral ceremony service, compile the elements that are going to be presented in this beautiful service, which I think everybody should have. And that happens either in the home, in a chapel, at graveside, in the crematory, wherever that is. But these little pieces of the process are very important for the ones who are left behind.
Right.
And it helps them put their life, I don't want to say back together, but it helps them to move forward when they've taken care of these details for their loved ones. So I stick to Death Midwife, and I feel like it's almost Death Midwifery is the umbrella, if you will, over the entire process from when you're first diagnosed with your life-limiting illness, all the way through the people who care for you, the palliative care team, the hospice care team, the caregivers in the home. It would be the death doula, the home funeral guide, maybe the funeral director even, and the people in the cemetery and the crematory. They're all part of this death journey and what to do with the soul and the body. So that the whole thing is death midwifery.
Right. I like that. So you said you came upon it about 20 years ago. What was going on 20 years ago that introduced you to this whole thing?
Well, it's when my mum died, and I went home to take care of her, and I witnessed her beautiful dying, very conscious. She put everything in order. She knew where she was going spiritually. She had had an incredible life. There was no stone left unturned. And, she always kept saying, I'm good to go. You got to die of something. But she wasn't going to die until she died. So every day we had to get her out of bed, sit her in the chair, dress her, do her hair. She wasn't about to just lay down and curl up and go to sleep. She said, I got breath in my lungs, I'm going to breathe them. So put me in the chair. And she was talking 12 hours before she died. I couldn't help thinking it was rather like the Queen of England, how the day before she died, she's doing her last, she was still working right up until the end. And then you just take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm good now. I'm finished.
Wow.
And I had a spiritual teacher once, and he said, it should be happy, healthy, dead. Happy, healthy, dead. That's
life right there, huh? Be happy, healthy, and then dead. I like that.
Yes. So, and the goal then is not to do this long, drawn-out dying process. But so Mum was teaching me that, and just witnessing her. She was the leader. We were all sort of, trailing in her wake, and I was awestruck really by the ease and the grace and the dignity that she did it. And then when she died, the hospice nurse invited me to help prepare her body. So I got to step into this new space with the actual dead and feel the difference. Hours before, it's all about the temperature in the room, and is she comfortable, is there enough pain, and pain medication, and how is her breathing, and there's a level of anticipatory sort of anxiety that is very heightened in the room, where we care about this thing, and we're all sort of a little bit on edge of this event that's going to happen. And then it happens, and there's this peace that takes over, and it was extraordinary, the difference in the energy in the room. Right away I felt it, and I was touched by it. It felt like, I call it the breath of eternity. It was over me as I stood there with her body, and I could tell that it was special, and I wanted it to go on for a while. So I was so grateful when the nurse said, would you like to help me prepare her body? And I said, oh, yeah, how do we do that? Tell me, show me, what do we do? And she gets the bowl of soapy water, and she puts some pretty music on, and then she lights a candle, and the way she just moved around the room, so quiet and kind and inviting for me. And then she said, just hold your mum in your arms, love, just like she did to you. Remember when you were born? And I'm holding Mother's very frail, white, dead body in my arms, and I got it, the circle of life. Wow. She held me, I'm holding her. At her most vulnerable, at the moment the doorway opens, when your baby is born and you're given it, and now the doorway opens and Mum's left. And it was striking in its there's the symbology of that, the circle of life. It was so complete. Yeah, it was very powerful.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how it began. And then I went, oh, everybody should be doing this. This is amazing. What have we done? What have we done with our dead? Why do we put them in plastic bags and stack them on refrigerator shelves? This is crazy. This is the most incredible experience, and we need it to have an awareness. I don't even know quite how to express it, but it's a full-blown awareness of what it is to live, because this end is part of the life, and we cannot keep it in the closet anymore and in the dark. And it's every day since. It has had its way with me and worked with me, and I dream of death. I read everything I can about death. I've fallen in love with death, and rather than become morbid, depressed, and kind of creepy, I feel like I've come to life, because now life is so precious to me. And I feel like I've woken up to my life in falling into what death is in this deep, deep, profound way that I have. So
I want to ask a couple things, because you mentioned, where was your mom living, by the way?
Well, she was in England.
Okay, so she was in England. So, because you said hospice, and I've seen a lot of hospice people, and I've not seen the hospice nurses often, bathe here. Not, maybe some do, but I was like, maybe that was different where you were at. So, had you been around much death and dying prior to where you even were able to notice how beautiful and different this was, what this hospice nurse was doing?
Well, I hadn't. I'd been around a lot of people as they died, because I had a hands-on healing practice back in the 80s, and a lot of my patients had AIDS at the time. So a lot of it was visiting the dying in the hospital and being with them through that process. So when they actually died in hospital, I left with their loved ones and their family. So I wasn't privy to what actually happened to the body.
Right.
We were definitely not invited in a hospital to help prepare it. And so I had a sense that it wasn't like that in America so much. And then when I got involved, I realized, no, it's definitely not. Yeah. So, but I'm fascinated by why we've made it so sterile and like a medical event rather than a spiritual.
What's your guess? Do you have a guess or a thought on that?
I think it's kind of happened. I don't want to blame anybody.
Right.
I don't think anybody's set out to take this away. I do know, when it started after the Civil War, and people died. The soldiers died on the battlefield, and they had to be brought back home. So units of the army were trained in embalming, so that they could get these soldiers back home, so their family could see them. And then when the war was over, they started knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, would you like us to embalm your loved one? We can keep them looking good like that for a few more days." And innocently, I think families went, "Oh, okay, can I?" In their urgency to keep the loved one sort of looking good or alive a little bit longer, because they don't want to say goodbye. We've always had a hard time with saying goodbye at death. And I don't think it's a fear of death so much as wanting to hold on to being with our loved ones. And I think that's just how it started. And before long, we forgot that what we'd literally given away the baby with the bathwater. We'd thrown away the spiritual opportunity to have an experience when we did that. And now we've become a little more conscious and we're more aware. So now we go, oh, sorry, did a wrong turn there. I want to take that back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's time that we recognize that we've let go of something that we need to reclaim. And just gently just say no. When my grandma died, I heard my auntie on the phone, and she was saying to the funeral director, "Oh, no, thank you. We don't need that. No, thank you. I can do it. No, it's okay. You don't need to come." And I didn't know at the time what she was saying no to until Grandma's there in the dining room, laid out, And,
oh,
wow. Then I realized this is part of my family's way of doing things. It's DIY, Whereas I think in America it's more, oh yeah, no, can you do it for me? I'd rather you did it. I don't really know. I don't know
delegate
how.
it, right? Delegate or outsource or whatever. Leave it for the professional.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's cultural too. So.
Brandon, you want to fire away?
Yeah, I was going to say, so this is one of the questions I had, maybe just, we didn't get into this when we were talking a little bit, but do you have a personal spiritual belief framework that you use around death and dying with your clients, or do you go to whatever spiritual belief they use? Or maybe explain what are your spiritual, what are your spiritual narratives or framework around death that you use? Are you Buddhist, or you said you did some energy work?
Well, first of all, I always make sure that I ask the family what is their belief, how would they like to honor the loved one, or if I'm helping the person in their process of dying, is there any belief that they have, any special scriptures? They're the leaders. I'm just creating the space so that they can have this be the way that they want it to be. So I would never impose or even share my views unless I'm asked. And mine is very eclectic. I was raised in the Protestant Church of England, went to church every Sunday, but left that when I left England when I was 22 and just began investigating all of the other religions. And in fact, I studied an intense metaphysical training when I got my degree in natural theology and sacred healing. We studied many different religions. Tibetan Bonpo was the teacher. And that's where I resonate most, is with the Tibetan Buddhists. It just seems to, I just get a yes when I read those teachings. But I'm intrigued by a lot of the other religions. I think they're all pointing to something very, very similar. There's this undeniable force in the universe, the cosmos, which is, we call it love. We're all from this essence of love, and our awareness, if we really let go of our ego and anything that we have been led to believe, if we can separate ourselves from that and just be in the truth of what is, it's just the essence of love and kindness. And all of the religions, I feel, were created to help us get back to that state. And so my sense is that we have this physical body. It's like a vehicle. It's like a car. You get in the car, it drives you somewhere. This physical body grows and enables us to walk through this period of time called our life journey with the senses: sight, seeing, touch, hearing. And our awareness is this luminous field of light that is both inside the physical body and also outside a little bit. And I think it actually stretches out like Leonardo da Vinci's drawing. When you stretch your arms out wide, that feels like the circle, the sphere where our awareness is all the time. And I get the sense that that we are all like spheres of light, like soap bubbles, if you will, and this physical body just lays in the middle like a diameter of this sphere. And so it's really important that we have it because it takes us where we need to go. But then when the electrical signals from the heart beating cease, then the brain stops working and the nervous system breaks down, then the chakras stop spinning. This field of awareness, this luminous light field, which is us, who we are, it can now separate from the physical body, and it moves on to whatever's next. Just like you were to see somebody step out of a car and walk down the street. I do think it's as simple as that. And so when I'm with somebody who's dying, we have these conversations if they're interested, and I notice that it's kind of comforting for them to imagine them, literally, this physical body just stops, the vehicle stops, and they get out, they move on, they separate. So it's less to do with dogma or nothing to do with religion, really. It's almost science.
Very cool. I've never really thought about, or what was coming to mind when you were speaking about that. It's almost like the body, where the body is in that field is sort of, it's like that, where your sense of your physical body is like, it's that connection. But I like that the awareness is a whole sphere, but we just kind of localize it, and wherever the body is like placed at the moment or in its position. And because, I feel like I can kind of feel there's some like, chi or Kundalini energy around your body, and I never thought of it as like that's your whole being, and you're just kind of moving through it and localizing it, where I always sort of imagine it as like emanating from the body rather than the body being in the center of it. Does that make sense? But that's cool. It's very cool to see it like encapsulated rather than projecting out from the heart is sort of how I always imagined it, maybe. But that's very cool.
I like that imagery.
Yeah, another way to put it is a lot of people think that the mind is in the body, like the mind is in the head, but I feel like the body is actually in the mind. If we think of the mind as the sphere, the soap bubble, the body rests inside it. It's more, when the body dies, and I tell people that when your body dies, your awareness, that which is you, that which is listening to me in this moment, will separate from the physical shell. We'll take care of that physical shell because it's taken care of you for a long time. It's carried you around, and you're welcome to stick around and watch us prepare your body until it's time, until you feel it's time for you to move on to your next part of your journey. And I hear and that there will be beings to meet you, so you'll be safe. But know that you can stay here for a few days, and that's why I do the home funeral. So because I feel that awareness does stick around for a little while. It's comforting for family members too to know that this luminous light field that's separated from this physical body, which is now laying on dry ice on a table, is now filling the room because it's not bound anymore by the physical.
I like that. And I'm so curious, how much of that is when you're with a family and, maybe they come to you knowing some of this, knowing none of this? How much do their minds get wonderfully blown because they hadn't thought of it at all, and then you have to kind of begin to open them up to it? Or how many of them come and sort of have some level of understanding? Because it seems like everybody I've met with, at least here in Orange County more so, and maybe it's the Christian background of a lot of the people I'm interacting with, it feels like that's all very, very new to them, and it's almost hard for them to even think of what the role of a death midwife might be for them. You know what I mean? And yet I think I want them all to have one. I want them all to have an Olivia, but I'm like, wow, how do they become open to that possibility or thinking like that?
Well, I think the good thing is, if they've never really thought about it before and they're pretty set with, when I die, I'm good. I think I'm going to go to heaven. And so they might not feel like they need it. However, when it gets close, anxiety seems to come into people, even though they do have this really strong belief. And you can see it in their eyes. Some might not want to actually talk about it, because the fear can be so great. So I might ask them, with sort of very subtle inquiry, you can begin to feel like what it is that they're really afraid of. And I think the majority of the time is because they don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm frightened of what might happen. And that's fair enough. That's a very valid fear.
Sure.
The unknown. Yeah. And it's not that I can take that away, because it's still unknown. And I've just become so familiar with this, what I call the mystery, which is the unknown, that I find actual comfort in feeling embraced by the mystery. It's sort of like exciting almost, that there's something that I'll never know. It's like the big adventure. So it's having conversations that can perhaps inspire the one who's about to enter this unknown space to feel excited about it rather than dread it. And sharing my belief about this luminous light field and the separation of body and spirit seems to be comforting.
I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go into one of my other questions. I said, what is the biggest blocks that people have when they're dying, and what do you normally overcome? Is it usually fear? I thought about how, like, when you die, there's a lot of grief, probably because in one way, everyone is sort of dying, theoretically, right? It's like you have to say goodbye to everyone, whereas most people who know someone who's dying, they're just going to have to lose that one person. But, you can imagine how it feels like you're about to lose every single person in one death. Mm-hmm. So is it grief? Is it fear? Is it... Regret. Yeah, I was going to say regret.
Well, the grief starts usually once they've got their terminal diagnosis, and they'll go back and forth from not being willing to accept it fully. So then they'll go into maybe denial a little bit and start, reaching for cures. Perhaps there's a little bit of desperation there. There's fear intertwined with that. And those are some of the stages that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about. Denial, then anger will come up, and then I don't want this to happen. Shouldn't happen to me, and then they'll sink into the depression of, oh my gosh, it's happening, and I'm nothing I can do about it. So it's very difficult to answer that question.
Yeah, it's everything. It sounds like, yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah.
You're like you said, you're saying goodbye to everything you've ever known, all of your dreams, all of your relationships, everything you've ever done, all of your businesses, everything.
Yeah.
And it's a process. It takes time to see where you're attached and to loosen the grip of that, and to relax and allow, without falling into this dark place of despair and depression. That's what we don't want for somebody to do. People will go there anyway for a little while, but and sadly, a lot of people do stay down there, and they don't want to come back up, and they end up feeling a lot of pain and take a lot of medication for it. And I think a lot of people do die in that state of despair, denial, and medication. And I would like to, in the perfect world, to encourage people to stay present in awe and curiosity. Wow, I can't believe it. My physical body is dying. Whoa, this is unbelievable. This body that I've walked around in for the last 70, 80 years is not going to work anymore. Now what? Now what? Now what? Rather than, oh, now what? In a panic, but now what? In a state of curiosity and interest. But it's hard to do that, and that's why we have to start practicing conscious dying while we're healthy and vibrant and living full, productive lives.
What do you mean by that? How do we... I know you do a whole weekend on it, but just maybe this will be a precursor for people to maybe want to sign up and understand that. But when you say we want to learn to do that now, conscious dying, like what does that look like?
Conscious dying is conscious living, isn't it? It's noticing when you're attached to something and you're clinging. I talk about it as you're either in a state of clinging, which is clenched and holding. You can put your fists together in front of your face. That's like you're holding, or you're open. Your hands are open. Your face is raised to the sky. You're relaxed. You're allowing. You're trusting. You're receiving. And in any moment during the day, you're in one of those two states, either tense and wanting and tight, or open. So conscious living to me is noticing which one, what am I doing? And if I found myself pacing around for 2 hours and I notice I don't feel good and I'm stressed, or that, what is stress? It's because I'm holding on to something. What am I clinging to in this moment? Can I stop? Can I sit down, take a deep breath, relax my shoulders, open my hands, and instantly you feel better.
Yeah, true.
And when you're dying, you'll have these moments. You can choose every 3 seconds. Have I gone back into fear and worry and concern and regret and remorse and all those other ones which are tight and clenched? Or can I take a deep breath and go, look, I'm on this ride. You're on a roller coaster, you've got the belt strapped in. You can either be or go, oh my gosh, put my hands in the air and scream and wait for the ride to finish. We always have a choice. And it's being aware enough that we have the choice. That is the work. Because as soon as you are aware, you can consciously choose to sit down, take a breath and let go. But most of the time, we forget. Yeah. We get so caught up in that attachment and the wanting that we need this little person to tap us on the shoulder. You can stop doing that for a minute. You can take a breath. And that's what the death doula does when she sees the person, anxious and clutching. And it's just that it's okay. It's okay. You've got this. You can take a deep breath. I'll breathe with you. Let's do it together. That's that.
Love that. You mentioned, the death doula will notice that. How is there have you found there's a good amount of rhythm of how often you might visit a patient and or a family when you're serving as a death midwife?
Well, that is all. Every case is so different. Yeah. If I'm called at the very beginning when they get the first diagnosis, then I might be talking to them once a week or so, maybe even more, helping them decide whether to do hospice, when to do hospice. And then there'll be a stretch when they perhaps don't need anybody because they've got it. And then it gets closer towards the end and they might start calling again, especially if they need tools to help them with the anxiety or relax. But I find more than anything, what I'd like to teach people how to do is, rather than be a death doula or a death midwife to strangers, what we need to do is everybody should learn how to do this for their loved ones, for their mum, their dad, their best friend, a neighbor. Because it's much better if you're there all the time, all day, or as often as possible. When I drop in once a week, I've missed all of those delicious moments that have gone on. So I would love to give these tools for everybody who knows that they're going to be midwifing a loved one, so that, because they're going to be on the ground 24/7, and they're the midwives. That's the true midwife doula. Is your beloved, is your anamukara, your best friend, the one who's going to take your hand and see you every step of the way. Which is why now I get a lot of pleasure out of teaching it, and do actually less of the bedside work now, because I want to empower the family members to do it.
I love that vision. When I had the privilege of, obviously, this, but I'm talking to all of our listeners, go through the various weekend courses with you. It was before COVID, so we all did it, in person. Now I know you've got Zoom, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But wow, when you talked about, that we each would not so much see it as a profession, but we would see it as a calling to identify 2 to 3 people that we might be able and willing and open to, being a death midwife for. And I the whole thing shifted for me. It's like, oh, she's not training people on a career path. She's training all of civilization on a calling. And it really struck a chord with what you were trying to get at there.
Yeah, I really want to change the culture of death and dying so that everybody becomes so familiar with it. It's tinged with kindness, not fear. And I'd like to go into high schools and talk about this to kids.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah, that feels where we need to begin. With children, so we can normalize all of this.
That's right. Yep.
And because it's all about love and kindness. That's what happens when you're at the deathbed. Their hearts are open. That's why the deathbed is such a delicious place to be. Everybody is like, they're open. Their hearts are sweet, and their ego is at the door somewhere. They had to leave it at the door because the ego wants to fix things and make it right. And when somebody's dying, you can't fix that. So there's no need for the ego. And then you're left with the person, the essence of these family members without that ego. It's just so beautiful. I leave always feeling so fed by that energy of vulnerable, loving acceptance.
I love that.
It's not what people think it is.
Right.
Where do you think that kindness comes from? Well, I'll kind of share the reason I'm asking that question. So a family member of mine passed away pretty recently, and he was a very big influence in my life in a lot of ways, but also had a lot of problems in his own life, and there was a lot of... he was a problematic person. He was my little brother's dad. I had my half-brother's dad. And so when he passed, it was this very interesting thing where you just let all of the negative things you feel about a person kind of go, and you just sort of have... he died suddenly, so we didn't get to be with him when he was dying. But why do you think that once someone's dying, we sort of see them in a nicer light than we... You know what I mean? We kind of take the pressure off of people's flaws, and we don't see that. Why do you think that is? Or do you notice that happens? Am I just imagining this? Or?
No, that's what makes it delicious. It does happen, doesn't it?
Right, yeah.
I think you realize there's no point anymore. There's no point holding all of those thoughts that were less than kind, all that judgment. It's pointless. This is a very vulnerable being. There's nothing in him that can hurt you anymore. He's laying there. He's going to die in a minute. So the only thing that's left to feel is, I love you. Thank you. No matter what you did the best you could. That is repeated so often. We are all doing the best we can. Even those people who are cruel and unkind, they're that way because they're wounded. They don't have open hearts. They are crippled. That is why they are being cruel. So they're the ones who need more kindness and loving attention. But sadly, we do the opposite. We judge, we criticize, we lock them up, we make them even more bad when they already feel bad enough. And we're perpetuating this problem of good and bad, right and wrong. And I think what happens at the deathbed, that all dissolves, and it just becomes one glorious ball of loving kindness, acceptance. Yeah.
I like that. It's beautiful. So I didn't know you 20 years ago when you were introduced to this, but how has this work continued to change you personally, would you say?
Well, I would say 100% I am much more accepting of differences across the board than I ever was. It does, it levels everything. And when you've swum in that energy for long enough, it becomes something that you want more of. And so if I have to change my mind or move towards acceptance, and rather than stand firm in my belief and my judgment and he's wrong, it just feels better to go the other way. So it's actually helped me become kinder, more loving and accepting. And I have to say, I did have some opinions and beliefs about how things should perhaps be, and all that's gone away too.
Yeah.
Which is sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Because when and this struck me once. I had a family. They were a Buddhist family, and I had a long conversation with the family in the living room. They knew the body had to be cremated, and we talked about it. And why it had to be cremated is that so that the soul could be completely separated from the physical body and liberated. And I was like, wow, yeah, of course. And the very next day, there was a Catholic family, and the body has to go into the ground, and it's really important that it goes into the ground, and because it needs to be intact in the ground for this, for the rapture that's going to happen later. And I was like, they both believed it, so it was true. It was solid true for both of them. And I love both of these families. And so I said, well, they must both be true then. They were
probably true. I mean, right?
Yeah.
They must either both be true or neither of them are true. And I chose to believe that both of them were true because they both believed they were true. Mm-hmm. And it kind of made me chuckle and laugh. So if that was the case between a body being cremated or buried, which are only two alternatives right now, there's a few more coming in, then what if that's the case for every opinion that we have? No, you're right and you're wrong. What if they're both right? And it's such a relief. It's liberating to allow your being to feel that, because then you don't really have to have an opinion. You don't have to stand firm in anything anymore. And it leaves room for this wave of kindness and acceptance for other, no matter what they believe or feel, to take precedence over my internal gut feeling, belief, whatever I want to call it. And I like how I feel inside when I do that. I feel healthier.
Yeah.
And more at ease. And yeah. So that's what it's taught me most, I think.
That's beautiful. Brandy, got another question?
Yeah, I've got some. Death is sort of it's a part of life, but it does kind of happen at the end of one's life. And so, or I guess this is something that someone brought up, but this is an argument that some people might have, which is, well, you're going to die anyway. So like, what does it matter? I was talking to someone about like why I don't smoke cigarettes anymore because it's unhealthy. And they're like, well, you're going to die anyway. And it's like, I don't really know. Sometimes I feel like people use the inevitability of death as like an excuse, as like a way to not live life. And it's funny how you found that it really amplifies your appreciation of everything. But you've heard obviously that more nihilistic argument of futility, and how do you respond to that? Or did that used to resonate with you, or was there a counter? Because I intuitively it feels wrong to just say, like, just because something ends that we should, I don't know, be wasted in a lot of ways, or like it doesn't matter what we do with our lives. But yeah, do you ever find that that's like a place that your mind goes to, is the inevitability? Who cares? But
well, it is inevitable, and the big question is, does anything really matter? Because we give meaning to life. I don't think has any meaning. I don't think there's a meaning to anything. We give it meaning. That's why that person believes that the body should be in the ground and that one believes it should be burnt. They've given that meaning. And I think we give meaning to absolutely everything. It doesn't innately have a meaning. So I make it my responsibility to give it meaning, and then to also stay open to changing my mind when something else comes in, or I get a bit more information, or something feels different. So I'm constantly in a state of flux and change. Now somebody else might go, couldn't care less about any of that. I'm just going to have a good life and get on with it. That's fine, right? Mm-hmm. Who am I to judge that? Like, if that feels right to them, go for it. That's the meaning they've chosen to give it. I have no desire to change their mind. That's not what I'm about. So I don't really preach any of this or stand on a soapbox and make it right or wrong. I do tend to think that the home funeral is a good idea because it provokes. It's very thought-provoking, and that can help somebody who might say, "Oh, I don't care what happens. I'm going to die anyway." One day, something is going to happen to them, and they may change their mind and begin to think in a different way. So, I don't know if I've answered that.
No, that's
very much so.
So to just let people, it's true. None of us know, and they may be right, and that is the interesting thing about death. I would say it's like nobody knows. Like nobody actually knows, right? Like no one's ever died and come back. We have like basically no data outside of maybe the Tibetan Buddhists, like you were saying, who have visions of the experiences, maybe. But yeah, isn't it? It's like that one thing that we all got to deal with that nobody's even had any clue. There's almost nothing in life, in existence, that's so unknown and yet so important. I find it. Yeah, maybe the best thing is to just say, well, how could we know? Mm-hmm.
And I think it's lovely to have these long conversations with somebody who's laying there on their deathbed, and I say to them, well, what do you think's going to happen? And they'll explain, I kind of think it's just curtains, really. I don't think there's anything afterwards, and I'm going to just probably dissolve into nothingness. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how that's going to feel. Do you think you're going to be a part of that? Do you think you'll actually have a sensation of it? And they'll describe it, and wherever it goes, it ends up being okay. If it's black curtains and nothing, at the end of the day, that's okay. And then someone else will say, no, I think my loved ones are going to meet me, and there's this light, and I feel like the soul is going to migrate through lifetimes, and then we'll have a conversation about that, and that's fine too. It really doesn't matter, does it? It's all it doesn't affect anything. It's interesting to contemplate, but like you say, we don't know. It's all got to be fine, and the only thing that really matters is right this second, speaking to you in this dialogue, increasing my awareness and my ability to be open to loving kindness. That's my goal. So I've made it my goal. and I'm enjoying my journey in that. But so I love not knowing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No, it's very liberating to feel this too.
It's harder to, Brent and I sometimes talk about, if you've got these hardcore answers, in some ways you can build a following. Not that we're looking to build a following, but if you've got hardcore answers or a common enemy, there's things that sell really good, right? To build
ending the mystery.
Yeah.
Selling the answers to the mystery.
Giving the answers, right? And yet I'm so in line exactly with what you're talking about, Olivia, and to invite others into that when also there's so many answers being peddled as, well, this is what happens. It's interesting to live in that tension.
Yes, live in that tension. You just said it, because when you think you're right, you've just built yourself a little castle, like you said, and you're limited. Yeah. You're not free because you've decided something, and therefore you've had to dismiss everything else which doesn't fit into your castle. Right. That's not fun.
Right. Yep.
And energetically, I wonder if that doesn't restrict energy flow, because you're trying to channel it to go a certain way, and nature doesn't do that. It's just it's like a free for all. So yeah.
We mentioned a couple times the words hospice, but how would you say, where does hospice fit into what you do, in case people are still unclear? So, okay, wait, death midwife, that's not hospice, but what is hospice, and how do they complement or go together, etc.?
Well, hospice is the umbrella for the care that somebody receives when they've chosen to stop doing life-affirming treatments to get well, when they've decided, or we've reached a point where they've accepted that the body is not going to regenerate, and they've accepted that, then the doctor will prescribe hospice, and that's when the doctor passes the baton to the hospice. And then the hospice take over, in that they provide all of the equipment that's necessary to keep somebody comfortable and safe in the last months of their journey. And in a perfect case scenario, it would be months before they actually died, so that in those last months, I think it should be 9 months of hospice. It takes 9 months to be born. What if it really does take 9 months to gently, shut down shop, as you will? Right. And during those 9 months, you could really have just a delicious experience. But sadly, most people are so afraid of dying that they're still clutching for cures right up until the very end, when the doctor finally goes, listen, there's nothing more I can do, and they've got like 3 days left.
Right. And
so hospice sweep in on those last 3 days, and sadly, they don't get the sort of comfort, relaxing time that they would have had they chosen this a lot sooner.
And when they're still fighting to live, they're not ready to have the conversations about a death directive type questions. Right?
No.
Right.
And it also prevents the family from having those discussions, even though they would probably like to a lot earlier. Right. Everyone's trying to take care of the dying person by not bringing it up, and everybody's biting their tongue, and you can feel it in the room. Yeah. So I like to just go in. I call a spade right to the beginning, right from the get-go. So what's your experience of what's happening right now? And they might just say right away, I think I'm dying, or the doctor says that, and I say, oh, that's interesting, but what's your experience of what's happening? And then finally they may be willing to say, I don't think I'm going to get better. And then the family in the room go, oh, he said it. Right. Now can we talk about
Right, they're coming to terms with this thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So the hospice is definitely the, like you said, the kind of the comfort care at the direction of the doctor, and then what you do is come in, and it's much more, it's not it's not the comfort care medicine type things, but it's all the other conversations, right? And preparations that can happen.
It's the other conversations. It's the spiritual piece, I think, and the providing tools to just help alleviate anxiety. Is there a relationship there that's still really bothering you? I mean, that might be 2 or 3 days worth of long conversations about that horrible thing that they either did that they can't forgive themselves for, or somebody else did to them that they haven't forgiven. It's usually forgiveness, which is, a big part of their spiritual journey, to be able to get to that point of acceptance or forgiveness. And then that helps them to let go at the end. So I think the role of the death doula in those months leading up to the last breath is to walk beside that person and to be able to reflect back if they're sensing that something's not quite complete, finished. There's an angst there that needs to be grappled with. And looking at the legacy too, like what do you want to live on after you've died? Is there anything? Some people are good, they don't need a legacy. They go, no, I want to be out of here. I know somebody so like that. She doesn't want her name anywhere. She wants all trace of her to disappear.
Wow.
The idea of a legacy is horrifying to her, which is unusual.
Yeah.
But I like it. I'm listening to her and going, wow. No, she goes, no, I want to evaporate. Like I don't even want there to be a tiny little footprint. It's gone. Somebody else will be afraid that people are going to forget them, and they want to make sure that they've got a legacy left behind. So
Keith just raised his hand. You can't see that, but Keith was
Mr. Ego or fear of being forgotten. I don't know what the hell that's all about, but my God, that's huge.
Haven't you heard the story of Ozymandias?
No.
There's I'm going to butcher it really quickly, but there's this guy, he finds a stone in like a sandy stone in all these ruins. It says something like, "Here lies Ozymandias, king of the world." And it's just like, I mean, Genghis Khan owned half the world and people don't even know his name is really Genghis Khan. You know what I mean? Wanting to be remembered is beyond futile.
Right.
Keith, don't worry. It won't happen. No need to put pressure on it. No one will remember it. I like the disappearing gal. She just wants to be erased. That's so strange. Yeah. But in a lot of ways. Yeah. We've talked about this on maybe another podcast. I would prefer to have no medical I don't want to have to choose whether I extend my life via medical involvement. And that's my I don't know if I want to die suddenly. I don't want them to say like, hey, you're going to die unless we slice all your fingers off and, do all this horrifying, to quote a Harry Potter book, calling surgeons muggle nutters that cut people up. I'm a little afraid of doctors and surgery, so I don't want to have to extend my life personally. I'd like to just be peacefully find out that it's not either in my hands immediately would be the preferred diagnosis, or to just die suddenly, which I know might not be the thing you're teaching is a sudden death, because you don't really get to say goodbye, but sometimes for me, I just want to get hit by a bus, I think. And I don't know. As an old guy, though,
Not now at 33.
Yeah, not at 33. But, here's a question I had that I wrote. Are you afraid to die?
No.
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 It sounded like
that today. I'm saying that today. But do you know what? We don't know, and I don't know how that will be if I get some weird, crazy illness that is causing a lot of pain, and we don't know what that's going to be, right? I think that's why we're not given advance warning of what it's going to be like. So that might change, but right today, no.
She reserves the right to one day be scared, shitless. But.
I reserve that right, yes.
Right.
It'll happen, it happens. I remember I had an epiphany a few years ago. I don't know exactly, but it's like you think of death as this thing you have to do, an active, like something you can mess up or do, like, you have to like jump and clear the gap to like die, that it's not an act. It's a very like American way. It's like, well, I got to die right, or I'm not going to, you know what I mean? You kind of just let death happen to you. And so is there something that is there a active way to let that happen easier? It's a kind of paradoxical question, but you know what I mean? It's like death happens to us. We don't have, it's like we don't have to sneeze. It's a sneeze just comes, and death just kind of comes like a biological process. Is there something we can do to relax more? Is relaxing the best thing we can do, or?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because Stephen Jenkinson, who is a wonderful teacher and has written some beautiful books on the subject, that he says that dying is a verb. So dying is not something that happens to you. Dying is something you do. I am dying. If you are dying, it's something you're doing. So therefore, it's something you can either do well or not do well. And he also shares that most people don't actually die. They turn away from it and they don't actively participate. They let it happen to them, which I find.
So then, what are the things that we actively participate in the death process?
So you're with it, present to it. Oh, wow, what's happening today? Today my body feels so tired. I can sense that the blood is slowing down. That is being present to this dying process. So you're engaged in the process. You are witnessing your body shutting down. You're separating yourself from being the body to witnessing the body. So you are in this dying process.
I love that.
You're fully engaged.
Like awake.
Wow, you're awake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just
You're
being
really
present is basically all we have to. But there's not I guess is there like a. This might sound weird. It's like, is there an exercise routine, like when you're in the process of dying, that makes it like, should you be walk? I mean, I don't know exactly how dying. I guess it's different for every disease and how you're dying, but like, are you? Does that make sense? Like, should you get good night's sleep?
Why you dying?
I know it sounds dumb, but it's kind of interesting. Right? Yeah. Like, what should you be eating? Right? Like, what's the diet for a
diet
right?
person.
Like, yeah. Is there anything like that? That's never thought about that. But it's like, should you not eat right before you die? Or you're supposed to die on an empty stomach? How does it work?
Olivia, Brandon's also does stand-up comedy.
Oh yeah, I'm a stand-up comedian. So
I can tell he's working on some material, I think.
Yeah. No, I'm honestly I'm really fascinated by death, but I don't. I'm honestly very suspicious. Like I said, my grandfather was a mortician, and I'm very suspicious of the whole industry, because whenever there is a mystery, the salesmen like you said, sell that answer, and so I'm always a little suspect of people. It's something that. Or even if it's taboo, then the people on the other side are kind of like in this weird shadow version. But you seem like you're very in the light of it, which I find refreshing. But death is it's a non. There is no right way to do it, but there's also, it feels like there's some wrong ways to do it. So I just I'm trying to.
Well, I think for me, reminding yourself and your loved one that you have a body, but you're not your body. You are the awareness that you have a body. So as your body is dying, where are you in relationship to that process? And reminding the loved one who's dying, or reminding yourself, I have a body, I'm not my body. My body is shutting down. My organs are shutting down. I am not my body. You're the awareness. So there's no real reason why you couldn't stay fully aware to that process. Of course, if you're on medication, that is extremely difficult, because you're in an altered state. So, the goal obviously would be to not be on medication, so you could stay as aware as possible. And yet, if the brain is also dying, then I think that will affect your awareness. I don't know, because I haven't died this lifetime yet. I might be remembering all this from other lifetimes. I don't know. A woman died last week, and apparently I wasn't there when she said it, but it was the day before she died, and everybody was standing around a bed, and she just suddenly went, "Oh my God, this is the most dramatic death I've ever had." And everybody started laughing because they realized that this was so who she was. She was a meditator. She was very conscious, she had this great group of people around her deathbed. And you wonder, have we not done this millions of times? We take new bodies, the bodies die. We take another body, the body dies. So perhaps somewhere in this awareness, this consciousness that migrates through lifetimes, it would sort of have a memory of this. Perhaps I just do remember. I don't know.
I know, right? Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, but I think that's part of the conscious dying is to be aware that the body is dying, but I can't die because I'm awareness.
Very cool.
And what does that feel like? Aren't you fascinated? I'm just so fascinated by what that's going to feel like.
Oh yeah. Even as a hospice chaplain now, I it's this thing because I'm supposed, it's the balance of meeting them where they're at, but wanting to ask a bunch of open-ended questions because I'm so intrigued and wanted to get them excited, but they're not necessarily excited yet, right? Or they haven't even come to terms yet with, they're on hospice, but they're still having conversations that they're going to beat this somehow. And
because nobody wants to die, let's face it. Nobody wants to say goodbye to all this love that's here.
Right.
It's hard.
Yeah. So,
I'm sure I'll be the same.
Yep. Right. So now you've also launched, Brandon mentioned the mortuary thing. You've opened a mortuary. Is that what you would call it?
Yes. So we have a full service funeral home.
Talk to us about that.
I started this 7 years ago now when I was doing the home funerals, helping as a midwife guide families through preparing their loved ones after they died, bathing, anointing, dressing, shrouding, and finding a place in the house to lay the body in honor, and then having a 3-day vigil where visitors could come and be present to the dead and then hold a ceremony in the home. And that's the piece that I realized was really helping communities fall into this dying in a more accepting, loving way. They weren't afraid of it anymore after the 3-day vigil and home funeral. And then I would have to work with other funeral homes when it came to transporting the body to the crematory and or the graveside. And I just went, listen, if I was the funeral home, I could do the transport and the cremation and the burial. And so I started Sacred Crossings Alternative Funeral Home in order to do home funerals, green burials, full body sea burials, and offer these death midwifery services. And it's been great, but the hardest piece still is letting people, first of all, letting them know that this is an option, the home funeral. And then still you're faced with so many people who go, no, I don't think so. I kind of like the idea that let the funeral home do it.
Right. So everyone's listening. I want you to be real clear because there's magic here in what you're saying, but what's the benefit of a home funeral then?
Oh, there's so many benefits. Well, first of all, the most important one is that the family remains in charge from the get-go. What would you like to happen next? And they go, well, I don't know. What are my choices? Bingo. Well, we could leave him here. We could let him rest here for a little while. We could just do a simple bathing ritual right now. We can wear a suit. We could wrap him in a shroud. We could take him in the living room. What do you feel like? And then they look at each other like I've just given them a Christmas present. Like, you mean I can do whatever I want? I'm going, yeah, he's your loved one. What would you like?
So different, Olivia, what you're saying. So foreign. People are like, what? And sometimes they think they don't want those options, but really they do. But even listeners right now are going, I don't want to have to decide if my loved one's going to be bathed while I'm here. Can't we outsource that?
Oh, it's funny, isn't it? And I go, it's okay, let's start it. And I'll go and get the bowls of soapy water. And I'll say, why don't you take his shirt off? And before you know it, this trepidation, this fear, and it's only because we're just not used to it, just dissolves. And they go to it. And they take his pajamas off. And they start laughing. And they go, oh, my gosh. And it becomes like the most natural thing on earth that they took his pajamas off, and then I'll give him the soapy water. I'm like, why don't you wash his face? You want to do his arms? Here, look. And the little 7-year-old will come running in. I say, you want to do Grandpa's feet? And they always say, yes, please. Wow. They love it. Wow. And now the family are like, oh my God, this is kind of surreal. He's dead and we're washing him. And I just maintain this aura of calm, the most normal thing on earth. Everything's easy, nothing's to be afraid of. And then gradually everybody sort of falls into it. And then they really get into it and about choosing their outfit. And they want to help. What can I do? I said, we go and get some dry ice. Smart and Final's on the corner there. I find out where it is. And I give them the job of going to get the dry ice because they love doing something.
Right, they want to do
When
something.
you're grieving, you want to do something. You want to move your body and feel like you're a part of it. So they end up doing it all. I just explain to them how it's going to go and how to do it. And they're so grateful in the end. And you go back the next day and they're covered in flowers and the table's beautifully draped and the room looks gorgeous. And over the next 2 days, and everybody who steps through the door is transformed. Everybody.
Neighbors? Do neighbors come? Do they have to twist the neighbor's arms at first? Or neighbors like, hell no, I'm not going? And then the neighbors do and love it?
Yeah, they say that at first. Oh, I know, I don't need to.
No, thank you.
Come on, you've got to come and see him. He looks so good. And they go, really? He looks good? The dead guy looks good? And then they come in and go, oh my God, he does look good. Are you sure he's... And they all look good. And they're not manipulated, they're not embalmed, their blood hasn't been sucked out of them, they're not replaced with, toxic chemicals, and they're just the way they were the day before yesterday. Their heart's not beating. That's basically the only thing that's changed.
Wow.
And then, so dead becomes soft and quiet and still and peaceful, not scary and morbid and creepy and weird.
And so how do then you help them actually plan the funeral that's going to happen right there at the home? Do they have to go get a casket? Yeah.
Well, if they're going to do cremation, then I'll bring a cardboard cremation box to the house with art supplies, and they lay it on the coffee table or the patio outside, and they look at this big white box, and I go, well, everybody's cremated in a box. Why don't you could decorate it, and it becomes the envelope. We'll make a little bed inside and put a beautiful comforter in there, and they're so pleased to be able to do this last wonderful gift for their poor dad who's laying in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So, and everybody, they love getting into that. They do messages and they stick things on it and photographs, and the lids become, usually I suggest an artist in the group will do something glorious on the lid that represents Dad. I've had one that was the front of his Ford pickup truck was the top of the lid.
Wow.
Someone else had a beautiful eagle and trees, and so that's happening. Or they can build their own box. Go to Home Depot. I just say, and I can find directions on the internet. They go off to Home Depot and build their own pine box.
Really? People do that?
Yeah, they love that.
Wow.
Because
they're doing it. I know. It's just
they're doing it.
So
they're doing
different.
everything. Yeah. And then they'll help lift him up and put him in the box on the third day, and we'll hold and during those 3 days, while I go back every day with the dry ice to make sure that he's, obviously I'm there to make sure he stays the right temperature and nothing happens. And then on the third day, we create this lovely funeral service with tributes and music, and we make prayer flags, or do more decoration on the box, fill the box up with flowers and bits and photographs, and it's stunning.
Brandon, what are you thinking as you're hearing all this?
I think I've actually gone with, since nobody knows, the fact that I'm creeped out by it is also fine. It's funny. My mother told me she doesn't want any of us to see her dead body. She said, "That's disgusting. Please don't." My mom's quite a character, but yeah, she was very adamant on a phone call 2 or 3 days ago. She's like, "I don't want you seeing my body. It's disgusting. That's gross. That's not who I am. I'm just the spirit inside." But sadly, ironically for my mother, her father literally died in her arms while she was moving him in the middle of the night. And so that was she's a very phobic of dead bodies, and that had to be a pretty rough karmic thing to have. The person that's honestly more afraid of bodies and dead things than anyone I've ever met held her father while he gave his last breath, which was, to quote her, "I didn't like that happened." I didn't, but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to just I like just living with the mystery, I don't I still think maybe I'm just too young and haven't been around death enough to really, but it is interesting to think of the ways at which you can normalize it, make it less. Because I really don't like as you said, the funeral prepared home that I used to call a piñata made out of my grandfather. It's very, very inhuman, and that is the creepiest thing, I think. Is like the fake makeup and the reading glasses, and he's in a suit, and it's weird, and his eyes are closed, but he's wearing glasses. So the pageantry of it is a little gross for me, but I think maybe we talked about this maybe at Death Cafe, about how our bodies are wired to see a dead body that's natural, probably a lot more than they're wired to see a funeralized body, so it's probably creepier for our nervous system to see something that's unnatural than something as natural as a corpse. So I don't know, but I haven't spent a lot of time around corpses.
Thoughts on that, Olivia? What Brandon talked about pretty normal? Well, you hear that probably a lot.
Especially if somebody has watched their loved one through a long illness, and they've been standing around the bed as they took their last breath. It's the most normal thing in the world to see them 2 hours later looking exactly the same, except a little bit more relaxed. The brain can digest that. It's just like, oh, okay, he's still here, the body's still here, it's just not breathing. That's very normal. But if the body is whisked away, like you say, and then made up, embalmed, put in a suit, and with eye caps and the jaw wired shut, and then brought back, that is, the brain doesn't know what to do with that. Like, what just happened? Why did we do that?
Yeah, what is this?
right, what is going on?
Yeah, it's a last story about that. The first time I ever saw a dead body was my grandfather, who was funeralized, and there were a bunch of lily flowers around him, and those are a very pungent smell, and I hadn't really smelled lilies a lot, so now my body, it just mapped. It's like dead body smells like lilies, and so whenever I smell lilies, it just kind of takes me to that. I'm like, is this the smell of a corpse or I don't know? So
right,
that's
just association. But
I'm a grown up, so I can and I meditate, so I can put some space in between these reactive thoughts. So, but you mentioned that you're Buddhist. Do you meditate at all? Or
yes.
Do you have a meditation practice?
I used to meditate a lot more, but I'm finding now that my day-to-day movements feel like meditation almost.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the goal is that they say you practice. It's a practice so that you do it. You're supposed to be in that state when you sit down. That you get into when you sit down in your waking life. So maybe you're just enlightened. That's it. Congrats. Part-time enlightened.
Part-time.
No.
Every other moment.
And I think being able to meditate while you're walking or doing the dishes is also a long way from enlightenment, whatever that is. But no, I'm certainly not there. I'm at school like the rest of us.
Very cool. But thank you for sharing. Yeah, you have such a love for it that you can really hear, and so thank you for sharing that perspective on it with me.
Thank you.
Are there any things that you want to share? Maybe we didn't give a question that was the right prompt, but there was something else that for the people that are going to listen to this that you would want them to know about death, life, sacred crossings, anything like that?
Well, I have to say I do think that taking at least level 1, my training starts with level 1, which is called Enter the Grave. And it's, as you know, Keith, it's a deep personal dive into your own thoughts, beliefs, fears, phobias about this thing called death. And I really do feel it's very important for anybody who's even contemplating going into the work as a death doula or a death midwife, or that you've got a loved one who's on their journey, because unless we can be brave enough to really examine our own beliefs, fears, and phobias about this, we can't really be present to another, because we're going to just be constantly triggered and we can't stay grounded and create that safe space for them. So I don't know how to. I called it Enter the Grave, and everyone said, "Oh, that's a horrible title. Nobody's going to want to do that workshop." But the truth is, I want it to be that way, because that's really what I'm trying to let people realize, that this grave is warm and it's a place of transformation. Like the womb and the tomb, they're the bookends of life. Right. And so the grave is the tomb where growth happens. Like you bury a seed in the ground, the seed in the womb, it starts to grow. The same with the tomb. So if we can fall into our grave, we can begin to really grow. And that's why I call it that. And I know that I have grown into somebody completely different because I live in the grave. And it's not scary to me. Yeah. So I would just invite people to at least take level 1, and then if it is something that you feel like you'd like to explore in more depth and help another through their journey, then level 2, which is conscious dying, which is much more of the nuts and bolts of how to help guide another one through the process, would be the next step. But nobody needs to do that. I'd like to take Enter the Grave into high school.
That would be powerful. Really, really. It was profound for me. I came out of that weekend changed and eager to live more fully and live more freely, and be more connected than ever to those I love. And yeah, I can't recommend all of your training, for people that want to do the whole death midwifery training is just, it's the best. But I like that the invitation for anyone and everyone to check out Enter the Grave. And do you, if they were to do that, I mean, they can get all the info online, but at your website. But is it offered in a weekend setting? Is that still how you're offering it? What's the kind of the format for people that are just wondering, well, what does that mean if I'm going to do Enter the Grave? What are they kind of signing up for?
It is a 3-day weekend, and I do offer it both in person and on Zoom, and people go, oh my gosh, 3 days in front of a Zoom call. But it feels important to stay in this energy field for 3 solid days rather than sort of spread it out and work on your own time. I think you miss out on the group energy, which you can get from everyone else in the room if you do it all together. So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it goes much quicker than you think it will. So it
flies by. And you're in LA, so for all of our Southern California folks, one of the weekends I did it, I went and did an Airbnb, and that was cool. And then I didn't have to drive very far. But even from Orange County, then another couple weekends of training that I did with you, I just drove back and forth, Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday, evening when it was over, and that was good too. So people know both are doable if they want to do it in person, which I recommend. But if you can't do it in person, or you live far away and can't fly in, then Zoom is a great option.
And we have one coming up in person in January. So
is it Enter the Grave?
Enter the Grave is January, and the details are on sacredcrossings.com. Is where you can find the information on the classes, and Sacred Crossings Funeral Home, if you know of anyone who would like to do either a home funeral. We do green burials, witness cremations, and full body sea burials out of Long Beach and San Pedro. So
Keith is nodding and smiling at me because my grandfather was the only non-naval he was like the first guy to go out of Long Beach with the full body burial, and his casket did not sink because they used a show casket that was made of wood. So just a heads up, if you guys haven't learned that lesson, he was the pilot. He got the permits done, and he was the first one allegedly that got that. He basically made it legal and then was the first person to ever use it. So, but yeah, his casket did not sink until we tied an anchor to it, which is quite funny, and I think that is sometimes helpful in a funeral setting. A little humor brings a little bit of levity to that. But yeah, you might, I don't know. Yeah, that was if it's out of Long Beach, it's probably the same sort of guy that was my grandfather allegedly got that legalized in California. According to I don't know.
Well, now it has to be a metal casket, obviously, but all of the people we help, they just use the shroud. We weight a shroud with 150 pound of ballast and send the shroud to the seafloor.
That's smarter. It's much smarter. You guys are smart. You guys get it. It's trial and error. There's no.
And I didn't even know that was an option. When I first started, before I signed up for Olivia's course, it was always, I want to be cremated. And then I went through Olivia's course. So I'm doing full body burial at sea. So I've got that down in my death directive, and people who are going to help me when my day comes know that, and it's good.
Oh, good. I love those. It's such a lovely day out. You take the boat 6 miles out, the dolphins come and escort you. You put the shroud down into the ocean. Everybody sings and says words, throws flowers on the water, and you could drive back. There's no plot. There's no opening and closing of the grave. There's no mowing the lawns. And it does seem silly, doesn't it, that people who are buried, they own that piece of land for thousands and thousands of years, and they're dead, and they still own it.
Right.
It's crazy.
Oh, I know.
It almost feels like you're not letting go in a lot of ways sometimes. Whereas the chaos of the ocean, it's like, it's gone. Or it's back to source or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes the ocean. Apparently, every molecule becomes the water. So eventually, you become rain. You return to the ocean of life. So.
I think I might do the tree burial. I hear you can get buried under a tree. They grow a tree out of your body. That seems kind of cool. I love trees, so that would be nice.
Is that urban legend, Olivia, or is that true?
Is that true? Have you heard that?
Well, I've yet to know of I've yet to see a body buried and a tree put directly on top of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do put the tree in the cemetery still. But
interesting.
There's that one. Is it Tibet where they chop you up and have eagles eat you? That seems pretty cool. Eagle
sky
death.
burial.
Sky burial. That maybe is a better for me. But.
Well, I think that's the greenest way to go, because it's definitely recycled through the animal kingdom, and then but certainly not legal in America yet.
Right.
Maybe someday funerals will be like weddings. You'll have like a Pinterest and all this like Instagram. Get it all ready and it'll be like a fun thing that you plan and have it be exciting and event, not as scary. Hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're aiming to do here. Just to plan ahead.
Olivia, this has been amazing. Like I knew it would, because I've had the chance of sitting with you. Well, I liked all your weekend training so much. I came back just to volunteer, really just so I could come hear you again. So it's mine and Brandon's hope that our listeners listen from, a few different points of view. One is we want to help people flourish, and we know that if we can come to terms with our own living and dying, and like you said, being aware of each moment, that we're probably going to have a better chance at figuring out what it means to flourish and flourishing in our own way, right? Mm-hmm. And then second of all, though, is also if we want to live lives grounded in kindness, that how do we be with one another in our aging and dying journeys? And then grieving journeys as well, right? And so what you've had to offer, I hope it just whets people's appetites to dive into, explore sacredcrossings.com, check you out, do their own research. There's books out there and videos and all kinds of stuff that people can get a hold of to learn more about it. And I just look forward to more opportunities to somehow work alongside you in what you're up to.
Well, thank you, Keith. I really appreciate you, and I just love what you're doing down there in Costa Mesa with the Death Cafe and the whole idea of spilling out kindness. I just love that word, and I love that you're using it in your work, because we could live on kindness.
Yeah.
We could fix a lot of things with just vibrating at that frequency and remembering. Because when you're living in loving kindness, there can't be judgment. There can't be, I'm right, you're wrong. It's just, we're all doing the best we can, is kind.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brandon, anything you want to sign off to say?
Just thank you so much for chatting with us. We're coming up on an hour and a half. Before we were, she's like, I don't know if I could talk for more than, we got you to do an hour and a half. So thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. I could talk forever.
No, that was great.
Thank
it was really beautiful stuff.
All right.
You're so welcome. God bless you both.
Okay.
Take care.
Blessings to you. Thanks, Olivia.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate.